Hey everyone, it's Michael Shermer here. Here's a cool idea. If you want to support the show and the Skeptic Society, we are a 501c3 nonprofit science, educational, and research organization. You can make a donation to support the show and the society. And in return, I will review something you're working on. It could be an article, an idea, an argument, or anything else you're trying to refine, and you'd like my opinion on it or some feedback to shape it up. So go to bignerve.com/skeptic, make a donation to the show for the show and the society, and directly ask for my feedback. I will be reviewing these as they come in. So check it out, bignerve.com/skeptic. So what's your interest? What's your story? How'd you make the transition from being an electrical engineer and computer designer of flashcards and so on to UFOs?
Well, good question. So when I was a teenager, I had read J. Allen Hynek's book, The UFO Experience. So I thought it was interesting, and I kind of put it aside, right, because life intervenes. I went to college, got married, raised a family. I didn't really have time to deal with UFOs at the time. I was fortunate. I was able to retire early. So I made my list. Okay, what do you want to do in life for the rest of your life, right? So one item on the list was go back and look at that question of UFOs and see if there's any substance to it. And so that's what I did. And I started that journey off by joining MUFON because that was the only organization I was aware of at the time. And that was in 2006. And along the way, I ran into a guy, Professor Michael Swords, who is a ufologist. He's from Western Michigan University, and I was attracted to him because he looked at it from a scientific perspective. And so that's what really got me more and more interested in the subject.
Right. So you gave up doing your day job and then started collecting information, interviewing people, going to different places where there were flaps or sightings or whatever, and then writing it all up. And now we have a book on the subject. I read your book. I think it's one of the better of the, I guess you might say, on that side of the debate, if there are two sides.
Right.
I mean, you're pretty skeptical on a lot of stuff. So, there's not a lot of daylight between us on some things. Other things, you lean in that direction. I'd say you're pretty cautious in your suggestion that these could be representations of some sort of extraterrestrial intelligences. So I thought that was good. So let's start by distinguishing two types of questions. Are they out there somewhere? Have they come here? The they being, of course, aliens. Again, that's what people care about. And so I think probably there's the least amount of daylight between us on the are they out there. I agree with you. I think it's very probable they're out there. It seems unlikely, but given the sheer numbers, just the hundreds of billions of stars in every one of the hundreds of billions of galaxies, maybe a trillion galaxies. They're now saying, and now it looks like pretty much every star has planets around it. So just by the sheer odds, no matter how improbable it is that the planet's in the right distance from the sun and it has the right conditions for water or whatever to give rise to life, and then all the steps from bacteria to big brains and so on that you would get intelligence, it's going to happen. It's almost pretty much inevitable with such the law of large numbers.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's almost like, and this is just my gut feel on this one, Michael, is that I think nature drives planets towards life. I think if there's any possibility of an environment that has oxygen, nitrogen, the same things we have here on Earth, I think life will develop. I think it's just a question of time. And it's possible that life has gotten here and on all other planets just by being distributed via asteroids, meteorites, throughout the galaxy.
What are your thoughts on the origins of life as a kind of a sidebar? There are arguments made by intelligent design theorists that it can't happen naturally. It's too complex. Even simple cells are really complex machines, and you need some kind of divine intervention or an intelligent designer to tweak the particles a little bit, or even the more modest version is that the designer, how is it said, preloaded into the laws of nature that would give rise to life in some designed way. Do you think you need that, or is just the law of large numbers will give it that direction?
I I thought about that a lot, and my feeling is that there probably is some type of underwriting code that has created life. That it's not just purely by chance. So I do think that uh, the DNA that we're made of that wasn't purely just random chemicals that came together and created RNA and then DNA. So I do think that.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I guess another question along those lines is that just part of, I don't know, emergent properties of complex adaptive systems? There's no outside designer. It's just the laws of nature are such that if you put energy into a system, molecules assemble naturally into more complex structures like protein chains, and that gives rise to crude cells, and then you're off and running from the left wall of simplicity toward something more complex.
Yeah, and I'm not enough of a biologist to really address the question properly, but I just have a hard time understanding how randomly, right, that all this would come together. Um, because it just seems like there's some underlying code that drove it all.
Yeah, but it's not random. Evolutionary biologists don't think it's random. Natural selection is not random. I don't know, the genetic mutations and the kind of particles moving around in a system, those are random. But there's a directionality to evolution in the sense that adaptive functions arise just by not chance, but this is how natural selection operates. Those that are more likely to survive pass on their genes for those particular characteristics. So, as Dawkins puts it this way, it's random mutations plus non-random cumulative selection. So there is a directionality toward design. The wings are designed to fly, eyes are designed to see. The question is, what's the designer? So, Darwin said, well, it's natural selection. It's from the bottom up. You don't need a top down. That Dan Dennett, may he rest in peace, since we just lost Dan, made a distinction between skyhooks that drop things into a system versus cranes that build them up from the bottom up. And the evolutionary process is more of a crane than a skyhook.
No, I agree with that part. I believe that evolution is not the primary driver of intelligence as it advances. An example: if you look at the Indians in Peru, right? They have larger red blood cells than the average human being, and that's because they live at high altitudes. Well, I don't believe they went to the top of the mountain and the Indians who did not have the large red blood cells died, and the guys who had the big red blood cells survived. I think that as their civilization progressed upwards, the bodies started making the larger red blood cells in reaction to the environment. So I think it's
That's
along
right.
those lines.
Yeah, those are epigenetic effects that are pretty well documented. Yeah. Okay, then related to that, as we move toward UFOs, do you think aliens would look anything like humans? I mean, what are the, in terms of the various kinds of intelligence that could evolve anywhere in the cosmos? I mean, Sagan used to make the point, we don't want to be carbon chauvinists. We don't want to be, primate chauvinists. The chance of them looking like us, come on. That's why he didn't show the aliens in Contact. He didn't say what they look like or anything like that. But on the other hand, so I've made this argument before because that's what I think. But, Simon Conway Morris makes the point of convergent evolution, that there's certain things that are going to happen over and over in evolution because they work. So the fusiform body for fish-like creatures, you have to have a body like that to push through a thick medium like water. So even mammals that are in the water, dolphins and whales and so on, they still have fish-like bodies because you got to have that to push through the water. or wings. Mammals have wings like bats, or penguins, wings that aren't very good for flying, or birds and pterodactyls. The wings have to be a certain kind of structure, or eyes to see, legs to move around on the land. So Morris's argument is that you're likely to get, if not a primate, but something like the brains and sensory apparatus on one end, the waste disposal system on the other end, arms and legs to move around. So you're going to get an alien that's probably something like that. And I don't know what to think about that, but curious to know your thoughts.
I agree with that. I watch squirrels sometimes, and I just imagine if you eliminated all humans from the planet, I could just see the squirrel slowly losing his tail, getting a little bit larger. Those hands that move so rapidly and so finely skilled, developing, and you come out with a bipedal creature that doesn't look that dissimilar to us.
Yeah. There was a paleontologist, Dale, I forget his name now, in the 90s, depicted what a dinosaur, bipedal dinosaur, would look like if they hadn't gone extinct and they had developed intelligence, and they'd be bipedal, so carrying tools in their other hands that they made and so on. Maybe. I mean, this is all speculation. We need to find actual aliens.
Right.
Okay, so now, have they come here? So the argument that most astronomers make, and I tend to agree with this, is that the distances are so vast that the chances of them finding us are pretty much nil, or close to nil. And so the analogies are like the Voyager spacecraft is just hauling ass at 70,000 miles an hour. If it was going to Alpha Centauri, which it's not, but if it was, it would take, I don't know, like 60,000 years to get there. Which is a long time to sit there and with your tray table down and your seat back. It's just, come on. And the other analogies, when the Andromeda Galaxy collides with the Milky Way galaxy, and however many millions of years that's going to be, that probably not even two of the hundreds of billions of stars in each galaxy will even collide, because the distances between the stars are so vast. So how do you respond to that as somebody who thinks it could be that UAPs represent extraterrestrials?
Well, so my first thought is, do they know we're here? And so my answer there is, I think the answer is a definite yes, right? Already we are beginning to look at the outer atmospheres of exoplanets, right, with spectrometers. So another 40 to 50 years, I think we will probably have identified some exoplanets that appear to have some type of intelligent civilization, perhaps based on complex hydrocarbons in the atmosphere, or maybe even plutonium isotopes in their atmosphere, which would tell us a few things. So I don't doubt that any intelligent civilization that's out there knows that we are here on this planet around this sun. So the next question is, can they get here? To me, that's the biggest question, right? Because they either have to travel at near light speed, or they have to travel somehow faster than light, such as warping space of some type. If you look at near light speed, already we have a project underway, right? The Breakthrough Project, which I suspect you're familiar with. And that's basically to hurl a microcomputer chip in reality, but it's a small spaceship that would weigh just a few grams with sails, and using powerful lasers, they could accelerate it to 20% of the speed of light, which puts it at Alpha Centauri in about 20 years, which is a reasonable period of time today. But of course, that's a very small chip. But perhaps a more advanced civilization has ways to hurl a larger spacecraft near the speed of light. And if they do that, at least for the occupants, right, they could travel anywhere in the galaxy within their lifetime, because time slows down for the occupants. Now, if they go back to their home world, their civilization has probably disappeared by then, because if you travel the 20,000 light years across our galaxy, that's 20,000 years. even though for the occupants, it could be a much shorter period of time, depending on how close they are to the speed of light. The other possibility is that they've learned somehow how to warp space so that they're traveling 20 light years, but not actually 20 light years. Perhaps they're only traveling a fraction of a light year. So those are the two possibilities. And I think it's reasonable to assume that of all the civilizations out there, that some have obtained that capability.
And maybe they return to their planet and it's run by apes. The premise of the
You're
Planet of the
right,
Apes.
right.
And that great scene at the end where he discovers, the Statue of Liberty there at the beach. Oh
Yeah.
no, you blew it all down. God damn it, you blew it all down. Yeah, right. Well, okay, so this is what you're doing here is speculating in a way based on extrapolating trends in progress in science and technology on Earth, which is reasonable. I think that we could do. What else can we do but imagine that happening? How far away could a civilization detect Earth with whatever imaginable telescopes they have or whatever?
Of course, that's speculation on my part again, but I would suspect out to several hundred light years that they could detect. Because today, I don't think today that if the Earth was 10 light years away, I don't believe we are able to detect it because we're able to basically detect these M-type planets, right, where you have a planet that's close to the star. In the case of the Earth, you've got a G-type star, and it's 93 million miles away. So our current telescope capabilities could not detect the Earth. But I think we continue advancing rapidly. Within 20 to 30 years, the number of exoplanets we will have discovered will probably go into the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. And somewhere out there, I think we'll detect an Earth-type planet on a G-type star.
That seems inevitable. I've had a number of astronomers on here. This is their job. And, it's just a matter of time, decades, maybe years or decades. But even if you're saying it's centuries away, like, I don't know, warp drive or something like that, if it's possible, could be thousands of years. But that's really nothing on an evolutionary time scale. The chances of a extraterrestrial intelligence being exactly in parallel with us on an evolutionary scale is zero, close to zero, and pretty much zero technologically. So they're either going to be way behind us, in which case the only way we find them is if we go there, or way, way ahead of us, and they then are using these technologies you're talking about, or even those we can't imagine. Again, I don't want to be that guy that says, well, we pretty much know everything now. So we got it all figured out because then, 2 centuries from now, they go, oh, look at that Shermer guy. I believe he's so limited in his thinking. Okay. So, yeah, that's all possible. Now, I've had people like Michio Kaku and others talk about if we encounter aliens here, they're not likely to be biological. They're likely to be AI of some kind because it's cheaper, faster, easier to send robots than it is biological beings.
I think that's a reasonable possibility that it would be easier and more likely that if we make contact someday, that it would be with, potentially AI. I mean, my human nature hopes that, it's not AI that, explores the universe, but that somehow it's a humanity, right? But is but I understand that argument, and it makes a lot of sense. That it would very likely be AI. Now, the other possibility, what if we are able to someday control energy just as today we control matter, right? So if I can control a plasma in some manner and send a contained plasma to another star system, and I can use that contained plasma to actually examine the star system, get spectral readings, maybe even somehow camera imagery of that star system. Then the easiest way now becomes not even AI, but to send, a packet of energy to another star system, and that's going to travel at the speed of light. And if by chance, right, you can use quantum physics and have entangled photons, well, then I may have an imagery device sitting here on my home planet, and I get an instantaneous image once my plasma ball makes it to another solar system.
I have a feeling you're also thinking of the Foo Fighters in World War II, because that's what they were. That's what those things are, right?
It does make you think about Foo Fighters and balls of light that people report sometimes as,
yeah.
zipping by.
Well, probably more likely than either one. Although, okay, just one thought on the AI thing. I think the idea is that the AI will be so advanced that it would essentially be a sentient being. I mean, we're almost there now. I mean, not quite, I think, past the Turing test or whatever, but, give it another few decades or centuries of development of artificial general intelligence. At some point, it's going to be like Data on Star Trek. It's crossed the uncanny valley and feels like a sentient being you're interacting with. And if that's AI, well, then what's the difference?
Yeah, that's true. And but I do have a little bit of the same concern Elon Musk has, and that's once you cross that border to where the AI is significantly more intelligent than you, and it has the ability to think on its own. At that point in time, I'm not sure that we can still control the AI.
Well, it's possible. I still think we could build in an off switch or the government. I always say this: never underestimate government regulators to step in and go, "Stop what you're doing right there. We're going to put a pause on this." The moment something bad happens. My example is, I order my Tesla to take me to LAX, and it avoids traffic by going up on the sidewalk and mowing down a bunch of pedestrians. That's the end of Tesla's self-driving program right then and there until he fixes it. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So, other things that we might be looking for in addition to biosignatures and other planets' atmospheres to see if there's life there. But technosignatures, this is the kind of thing that Avi Loeb is looking for with the Galileo project. And that also seems reasonable. Your thoughts?
Yeah. So, a few things on technosignatures. One that I wanted to mention regarding, distant planets is at some point in time we'll develop a chronograph where we can actually block out that planet's sun. And when we do that, or if someone was looking at our planet in the same manner, when they saw the night side of the planet, they would detect, oh, this is kind of strange. We have a particular wavelength of light that's being emitted on the backside of the planet, which of course is all of our cities that are lit up in incandescent light. So that would be a strong clue that you have an intelligent life there. But in terms of Avi, are you talking about within our solar system, or?
Well, his expedition to the South Pacific last summer, and he's got another one coming up this summer to a different part to kind of drag his magnetic sled across the bottom to pick up those little spherules of a meteorite, interstellar meteorite that landed in the ocean, and these are documented by the government, not by his lab or whatever. And so he just goes there to look for whatever the remains. Now, when he first told me about this, I envisioned him, hauling up the dashboard of the Millennium Falcon or something. Like, oh my God, there it is. It's alien, and it's these tiny little microspherules that may or may not be of a substance that's part of our solar system or some other solar system or whatever. It could be technological. And that's where it gets pretty fuzzy. But that's the idea, and that seems reasonable. I mean, just by odds, if there are these civilizations that send out self-replicating, let's say, probes, and one of them crashes into the Earth, it's going to just burn up in the atmosphere, but not completely. There'll be particles left of it or whatever. So you look for a composite materials that would not naturally be on Earth, and therefore you can deduct from that that this is extraterrestrial or something like that.
Yeah, I guess for me, that doesn't interest me as much as looking for a technosignature, an active technosignature in our atmosphere. And to me, the technosignature I would look for are signatures of extreme acceleration, because any civilization capable of interstellar travel, I think, is going to be able to demonstrate extreme acceleration. Um, so that's what I would look for in our atmosphere for technosignatures.
Well, that's obvious planning on doing that. I mean, he has that observatory at Harvard already set up. So far, they're just tracking birds and planes and things like that. But I guess yet to be established is the exact criteria for what would constitute a hit. That it's not a terrestrial normal phenomenon. Much like the SETI program, people, have some sort of criteria as is envisioned by Sagan in Contact. Something that beeps out prime numbers. That's not going to happen by a rotating neutron star or something like that.
So in terms of a technosignature that's extreme acceleration, there have been several cases where that's been demonstrated on radar. One example is the Stephenville incident. Another example is in 1968, Minot, North Dakota, U.S. Air Force Base there, B-52. And this is actually in Project Blue Book. The radar imagery is there. And Dr. Claude Hare actually analyzed that back in the 1970s. So that there are cases on radar that indicate extreme acceleration. The other one, and I know this is anecdotal, but we have a lot of these anecdotal cases where, let's say, for example, you walk outside and you're looking at an object that's the size of the full moon. So that's about half of a degree of space in the atmosphere. And suddenly that object begins to move, and within 2 seconds, the object is gone from your eyesight. So we can actually calculate how fast that object had to move in order to leave your eyesight. So the question, and it's a lot of g-forces to do that, to be gone within 2 seconds. The question then becomes, well, was it a glint of sunlight that made it disappear, and it really took much longer than 10 seconds? Or did it go behind a cloud, so it was really longer than 2 seconds? So those are the issues you have to walk through. But once you establish that you have credible observers and this object disappears within 2 seconds, for me, at least that's for me personally, that's sufficient evidence when I see case after case of that happening to convince me that, okay, there's something within our atmosphere capable of accelerating to extreme acceleration rates. If it was just one time, I would just write it off. But when I see it time after time, then that's what convinces me.
And here I think we're also in agreement. So give us your explanation for why you don't think these are Russian or Chinese drones or spy planes or whatever.
Right, because my view on that, and this is my view not only on Russian drones, but reverse engineering or anything along those lines, science develops, human science, at a controlled rate. It takes a lot of hard work and time to slowly advance things. We don't suddenly develop the ability, for example, like today, in terms of just linear acceleration. The highest linear acceleration is probably the SR-71, which can accelerate linearly to around 2 to 3 g-forces. And now I'm not counting missiles, but human-occupied jet aircraft. I mean, even the F-35 linearly won't accelerate more than about 1.5 Gs. Now they can make, angular acceleration and get up to 6, 7, 8 g-forces. But linear acceleration, we're very limited in what our capabilities are. Short of shooting a high-powered missile. But the thing about a missile or artillery shell, they have high g-forces, but they can't hover, and they don't come to a nice ending. They they end when they impact something. Um, so so the going back to your question, science develops slowly. So the Russians and the Chinese are not going to have some new technology that moves, at Mach 20 or that accelerates at 10 G forces or let alone 100 G forces. So that's my view when people think it's the Chinese or the Russians.
Yeah, I add to that we all know what everybody else is doing because we all have spy programs, and science doesn't develop that fast. In any case, we would know. Our scientists would know what their scientists are doing. Our spy agency would know what their spy agency knows about us, and so on. And the idea of back engineering, this would be like handing, a cell phone to a 15th century scientist and say, "Go ahead and back engineer that." Well, they're not going to have the available electronics and chips and so on to back engineer anything. They wouldn't even know what they're looking at. So yeah, that also seems unlikely. So, it's, and then just to discount the last one, that it's just normal terrestrial phenomena. You agree with me on this, and I'll just read from you rather than my writings on this. That let's see, this is you writing here, separating the wheat from the chaff. The first step must be taken to clean up the data. There's a large variation in the quantity of UFO reports, quality of UFO reports, because we're dealing with anecdotal reports by witnesses whose observational abilities vary. We know that there are more than 90% of UFO sightings are incidents where individuals thought they had seen an unidentified object that turned out to be a balloon, bird, plane, star, satellite, or ordinary object. Here I usually read from Leslie Kean's book on UFOs, that they could be, that she says roughly to 99% are explained by weather balloons, flares, sky lanterns, planes flying in formation, secret military aircraft, birds reflecting the sun, planes reflecting the sun, blimps, helicopters, the planets Venus or Mars, meteorites or meteors, space junk, satellites, swamp gas, spinning eddies, sun dogs, ball lightning, ice crystals, reflected light of the clouds, lights on the ground or lights in the cockpit window, temperature inversions, hole punch clouds, and the list goes on and on. Okay, so, in a Bayesian reasoning way, you see something new that you don't recognize. Which bin is it most likely to be in? The one that contains the 90 to 95%, or the other 5 to 10%? How do you think about that?
So, so a couple of things on that. First, that's why I like to concentrate on cases where the object is very close to the observer, right? So that we eliminate all those many, many things that you just mentioned, right? None of those explain a witness who sees an object at a distance of only, let's say, 500 feet, that's the angular size of it may be 2 to 3 degrees of angular size. I like those cases better because either the witness is lying, right, or it happened. It's not something they can misidentify. And one of my pet peeves is when someone takes raw UFO data, and it was actually recently done by two University of Utah professors in sociology, um, where you just take it and you say, okay, we have more UFO reports in California than anywhere else. Or maybe they even segregate it based on population density and say, oh, we have more in New Mexico. But you have to realize 90% of what you just analyzed or more, probably 95 to 98, is just garbage. So how can you draw any kind of correlation? The only correlation you can draw is reporting habits of those people, right? You can say Californians report more UFOs than New Mexicans, right? But you can't say there are more UFOs in California than New Mexico. So I think that really anyone who wants to analyze UFO reports need to screen the data by some method, either natural language processing or just raw human, going through report after report.
Yeah, you talk about the natural language processing in the book. Could you explain that a little bit more for people not familiar with it? What are you talking about there?
Okay. So natural language processing, here's a good example that might mean something more to people. If you were on Facebook and you start talking about bombs and you start talking about explosions and in a kind of aggressive nature, well, probably one of the US law enforcement agencies are going to detect that. And so that's natural language processing. They're saying, okay, anyone who uses these words are more likely to be in this category than people who don't use that word. So it's the same thing with UFOs. You would say, if your witness uses descriptive words and more analytical and scientific words, then the likelihood of their case being valid is much greater than someone who uses words that, for example, they use the word alien, mothership, uh, scared, bedroom. Those are all words that tend to indicate, the report is not one that you want. And so you want to get those out of the way as quickly as possible. So at least now you have this group, and then you need to whittle away at that group also.
Yeah. And I agree with you that I don't think these people are lying. I've talked to a lot of ufologists and people at head sightings, not as many. I've talked to a lot of the alien abductees also. You don't deal with that in your book. But, I don't think they're making these things up. I think they had some kind of real experience. I think people, when they said they saw something, they really saw something. They're not just hallucinating or they're mentally ill or whatever. There may be a few of those. I don't think they're lying to sell books or whatever. So I agree there. So once we, eliminate the 90 to 95% or even 98%, you're left with this 2%. So really what we're talking about here is a residue of unexplained phenomena. What do you do with that? Sort of epistemologically, how should we think about those anomalies? So for someone like me, I just go, well, we don't know what it is. We can't explain everything. No scientific theory explains everything. There's always anomalies. What about that little, glitch there in the photo? And, oh, it turned out it was a planet or it was a satellite and whatever it is. We'll figure this out, assign it to some grad student. And this is how science advances, right? You got all these anomalies. What are we going to do with them? Let's see. Let's wait and see. So what you're doing in a way is saying, okay, let's take that 2% or 5% and analyze the details of those and eliminate could be Chinese spy balloon or whatever. By the way, I'm glad you put a picture of the Chinese spy balloon, because when I'm now asked, what would it take for you to believe that these are extraterrestrials? I say it would be the equivalent of the Chinese spy balloon, where, all the news stations cover it. The Department of Defense acknowledges it. The Secretary of Defense says, yeah, we saw it. It's tracked across the United States. The jets go up there. They take clear, unmistakable photographs and videos. They shoot it down. There's the debris in the water. The Navy has the debris. End of story. No one talks about the credentials of the pilot that shot it down, or how good his eyesight was, or how many mayors or governors saw it. All that credentialing is irrelevant if you have actual evidence.
Yeah, now I hope we don't someday prove UFOs exist by shooting one down.
Well, I mean, that would maybe do it, right?
Yeah, that
a lot
would
of sci-fi
do it.
movies are
and
like
we
that.
have attempted to shoot UFOs down historically, but the Chinese spy balloon is a good example that I find very interesting. So we have that picture, right? Very nice, distinct photograph. Yet they shot down, I believe it was 2, if not 3 more UAP immediately afterwards. Now, I'm sure the pilot who shot those down had his camera out and took a picture before he shot it down also. But we don't get to see any of those photographs. And this is
Yes.
a problem I have with the government, not because I don't think that's a national security issue. My gut feel is we shot down a hobby balloon, and no one wants to admit that we spent $10 million shooting down a hobby balloon. But it really grates, I guess, my libertarian part of me, that the government picks and chooses what it will show us, not just on UFOs, on any subject, and what they won't show us.
Yeah, this bothers me to no end. Also, when people like David Grush get up to speak before Congress, and I know somebody that saw this incredible thing. Here's the story. Okay, who is it? Can't tell you. Where was this? Can't tell you. Okay, and I'm sure the government does, the Freedom of Information Act, you can only get so much, but they don't necessarily send everything. You don't even know what they know that they didn't send. But why? Then we're left speculating. Maybe they're embarrassed that, these balloons managed to get here and we didn't even realize it until they were in North Dakota. It's like, what? How did you not know this? Well, we knew it was when they got to Alaska. Oh, really? Okay. How come you didn't detect it like the moment the thing started floating above the atmosphere and over China or whatever? Anyway, so I don't know what to make of that. For decades I've been seeing these leaked, documents with the big blacked out paragraphs.
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do with that?
Right.
Okay.
And meanwhile, right, I saw an article several years ago where we state that the North Korean ICBM moved at 5,000 miles per hour. Well, there was no sources and methods concerned there, right? And radar data is like that. I mean, if I have access to the raw radar data, that can be a national security concern because I know how fast each frequency of the radar system is. But the output, right? What's the speed? And so that is not, there's no national security danger in telling you the speed. And so I don't understand why the government can't say, okay, this UAP was traveling at X speed or Y speed, and it's such and such altitude. There's nothing there that's of national security concern.
You would think, unless they know something we don't know. But that's always possible, I guess. I mean, Avi got that data from, about the possible interstellar meteor impacts from the government. That's available information, but there's others that are not available. I just had Annie Jacobson on the show for her new book on nuclear weapons, nuclear war a scenario. It's really quite startling. But she opens with the fact that we have these satellites way up in the space that can detect a rocket launch anywhere on Earth and within seconds know exactly how fast it's going, where it originated, where it's heading, where it's likely to impact. And that information, like in less than 30 seconds, is sent to the Pentagon. And that makes its way to the president or whoever within like a minute. Like, wow. Okay. So if there are UAPs coming from or wherever they are, these satellites must see all of that stuff.
Right. Absolutely. And so there's only two possibilities that I've come up with. One possibility is that NORAD is aware that there are objects that move from space into our atmosphere that are not meteorites. The second possibility, which I think is actually the more likely, is there's so much data, because you have so much debris, space debris out in low Earth orbit, that they're having to filter that radar data so that they're looking for objects that have hyperbolic curves to them and that are traveling within a certain, speed range and that are traveling either in orbit or coming up out of the atmosphere. They're not looking for something traveling at 150,000 miles an hour or something that is stationary in space and not even moving. So, and then suddenly moves. So I think that they filter out the data, and I think it would take a major effort to truly look, do we have something similar to meteorites that come into the atmosphere under some type of control mechanism?
Yeah. I wanted to read to you, I sent you my article on this, hang on, from Garrett Graff's book, UFO, The Inside Story of the U.S. Government Search for Alien Life Here and Out There. I was asking him, if the government is covering up a lot of this information, do you think they're able to do this? Because this guy also wrote a book on the Cold War and all the secrets the government kept, including this whole program, underground structure for where the government leaders go if there's a nuclear war. It's a whole underground thing I didn't even know about. So here is his answer. And I know you read this already, so you can respond to this. The challenge for me with government conspiracies is they presuppose a level of competence that is not on display in the rest of the work that the government does. I just don't believe that the government is capable of keeping a secret at scale like this for any meaningful period of time. For example, my next book is a history of D-Day, Operation Overlord, the biggest, most important secret that the U.S. government had. They had 6, 8, 10 complete breaches of secrecy in the 6 or 8 months before. One guy literally accidentally mailed a copy of the invasion plans to his mom in Chicago. One officer got drunk and accidentally started talking about the invasion at a cocktail party. Another officer left a briefcase behind on a bus that he ended up chasing down down the street trying to recover the invasion documents. That's one operation in one 6-month period. So to me, I just don't see the capability of the U.S. government to keep any meaningful secrets about this UFO program over a long period of time. And yet you have a conspiracy around UFOs that would employ thousands of people over decades, and not one has leaked anything or left a briefcase full of UFO secrets in an Uber or accidentally mailed documents to the wrong person or written a tell-all memoir or gone on 60 Minutes with firsthand knowledge.
and I agree with that to a certain extent, because I don't think there's any organization that goes back to the year 1942 that has been collecting the data, right, and still has that data today. I think instead what you have is just a myriad of different government organizations that maybe for 3 years this organization was involved, or maybe this airbase, the commander said, hey, I don't know what that was, but it's not going into my report, right? That's not really a government secrecy that goes over time. But I'll tell you, Michael, my view on that changed with the Nimitz incident. So prior to the Nimitz, I didn't think that there was any organization that existed for any significant period of time. And by that, I'll define significant period of time is a 20-year stretch, 10 to 20 years. In other words, a government body that for 10 to 20 years was really intensely looking at the UAP subject. But what changed my mind with the Nimitz incident was when on the Princeton, when Kevin Day the next morning went to write his report of what had happened that previous day, he went to his media logs that exist on the ship. So when I interviewed him, I asked him, I said, so what happened? And he said, well, the media logs have been erased. I said, well, is that unusual? How often does that happen? He said in his entire career, he had never seen that happen before. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. Then I interviewed Gary Boris. And the first thing I did was make sure that he and Kevin Day were not knowledgeable of each other and each other's stories. So that's the first thing I did. And so then I interview him, and then I ask him towards the end about this story he tells me at the very end. He says a helicopter lands, and they request that I give them the data on the Princeton. And he said he asked them for their credentials. They wouldn't give them. So he said, well, I can't give you that. And so they go to the captain, and the lieutenant comes down and says, lieutenant commander says, go ahead and give them the data and erase what we have left on the ship. So it was actually Gary Boris who deleted the data that was on the USS Princeton, as he was ordered to do so. So when that happened, I was like, wait, how within 24 hours does someone even know that this incident occurred, and then comes down and takes it? So that incident is what made me start thinking, okay, there's someone that's monitoring this kind of thing. So until then, I was in total agreement that there was no agency out there really checking on things.
Do you think there is something like a deep state, not in the Trumpian sense, but more specifically, there's just an organization within an organization within an organization that we just don't know about?
I think there may be an organization within the government that maybe has been doing this for the last 15 years or so, and monitoring it. And by that, I'm not talking about the like AATIP or OSAP or Aero or any of those groups. I'm talking about a something a little deeper within the government that may be monitoring for this type of information. That's my only explanation for what happened on the USS Princeton.
Okay, another question here for you. Navy pilot Ryan Graves told 60 Minutes correspondent Bill Whitaker that they had seen UAPs every day for at least a couple of years. Every day? I mean, don't they have cameras and videos? And there's, as I like to point out, there's over 1 billion of these smartphones in the world now. How come these UAP videos are always kind of grainy and blurry? You can't quite make out what's going on. You have to do some inference. Where are the really clear, sharp photos? What is your response to that?
Yeah. My reaction was the same. I was like, now that's got to be an exaggeration. And then my understanding of what Ryan was talking about now is that he was referring to radar data. In other words, objects were showing up on their new radar systems, and that was happening, on a every other day type notice. I don't think the pilots were actually seeing an object, that often. And just to give your viewers a little background, the type of radar system that's being put on these F-18s was the type, and this is the year 2015, was the type that was on the USS Princeton, a giant Navy ship, in the year 2004. But as you know, microelectronics shrinks. And today, we've got the equivalent of what one of those big Ticonderoga class cruisers had now on jet aircraft.
Right. Okay, another quote here. This dealing with eyewitness accounts. This is from the astronaut and pilot Scott Kelly at a NASA press conference related to these UAP sightings. In my experience of flying over 15,000 hours in 30-something years in airplanes and in space, the environment that we fly in is very conducive to optical illusions. So I get why these pilots will look at that go fast video and think it was going really fast. I remember one time I was flying off Virginia Beach military operating area, and my RIO, radar intercept officer, who sits in the back of the Tomcat, was convinced we flew by a UFO. I didn't see it, so we turned around to go look at it. Turns out it was a Bart Simpson balloon. He says, my brother Mark Kelly, they're twins, a former NASA astronaut and also now a U.S. Senator, shared a story with me about an experience he had years ago when he was the commander of the STS, Space Shuttle 124. They were getting ready to close the payload bay doors of the space shuttle, and they see something in the payload bay. And they thought it was a tool, maybe a bolt. They couldn't quite figure it out, and they were potentially going to have to go and do a spacewalk to retrieve it. But before they did that, my brother grabbed a camera, and they took a picture of it. And when they blew up the picture, they realized this is not a bolt or a tool in the payload bay. It was actually the International Space Station 80 miles away. And he says there are cases where pilots have rendezvoused on a buoy because they thought it was their wingman. He says it's just a very, very challenging environment to work, especially at night.
Yeah, I think there's some validity to that statement, right? In the Go Fast video, I could see, and I have not analyzed that video in detail, but that one would not surprise me if it were to be just an object, say at 10, 12,000 feet, and the motion they're seeing is the motion of the jet. But to me, I that's different than Fravor's case, right, where he's an F-18 at 20,000 feet. He sees the object near the ocean surface, and he drops to engage, right, and the object comes up towards him. To me, now that's the kind of scenario I like to investigate, because that one you can't really explain by, the pilot, he certainly wasn't dogfighting with the balloon, because the aerodynamics does not allow for that. The balloon zips by and it's gone. So that I find those type of cases much more interesting than like the Go Fast video or the gimbal video, for example. I find that one interesting because the pilots state, look at and he's talking about his radar system, there's a whole fleet of them, right? So it's not so much just this one object. It's like, okay, so what are all these other objects? And that's where I'm like, okay, where's the radar data? This was only the year 2015. Surely we haven't thrown that away already. So let's get the radar data and let's look at this. And that's what frustrates me so much with the military, is that you can't get the radar data. I don't know if you recall But in March of 2021, there was an American airline jet flying from Ohio to New Mexico. And the pilot was at 40,000 feet when he saw a cylindrical object fly rapidly by his aircraft. And I don't know if it was within 500 feet, which means it's a near miss. Okay, so I sent a FOIA, or a Freedom of Information Act request, to the FAA. The FAA replied back to me that we can't give you that information because it's a criminal investigation ongoing. So I said, wait,
What?
how's this a criminal investigation? We don't have any civilians who can fly drones at 40,000 feet. And I said, if this was the military, and that, was a cruise missile that almost hit that aircraft, the public has a right to know. And so I sent back an appeal, and I actually had an attorney, write back up, which included the fact that the FAA is not a investigative body for criminality. So, I mean, they can't use that excuse. And they still, rejected the appeal, which is always like the chicken guarding, or the fox guarding the chicken house.
You mean because it would expose themselves as being incompetent to not know what's actually going on there?
Well, I guess their argument is that there's some law enforcement body, such as Homeland Security or the FBI, that is investigating this case as a criminal case, and therefore we cannot give you the radar data for what happened with that jet aircraft.
By the way, just out of curiosity, since it's a commercial airliner, does the airliner, American Airlines, do they have to give any information to the public, or is it the FAA that would collect that data and then they have to give it to the public?
It's the FAA. Yeah, they're the ones who have the radar data.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Go through some of these UAP videos. Again, I sent you my chapter for my next book on. So I'm leaning on Mick West here, who's done a lot of the heavy lifting on trying to figure out what these are. This is the gimbal, an object that appears to skim effortlessly over the background clouds, then comes to an abrupt stop, rotate in midair with no apparent propulsion system to pull off such a maneuver. Again, West appears to be, I wrote this, the only person to notice that when the gimbal object rotates, background patches of light in the scene also rotate in perfect unison with the object. Here's Mick. I think what's clear about gimbal is it's very hot. It's consistent with two jet engines next to each other, and the glare of these engines gets a lot bigger than the actual aircraft itself, so it gets obscured by it. West explains, adding that at the start of the video, it looks like the object is moving rapidly to the left because of the parallax effect, and the rotation was a camera artifact, and that the flying saucer was simply the infrared glare from the engines of a distant aircraft that was flying away. When he looked up the patents for that camera, West found that the gimbal mechanism was responsible for the apparent rotation. Your thoughts?
So I'll give you a little different thought, and I've discussed this with Mick. This occurred in what's called a military operating area. So in a military operating area, and this was a carrier strike group, you don't have any commercial jets in that area. And any military jets are those of that carrier strike group, unless, for example, they're doing a red-blue exercise and you have some coming from the land doing an exercise. But they know where every jet is at. So the first thing is they would know if there was a jet there. The second thing is the pilot's own jet uses IFF to identify not only any friendly aircraft, right, which gives off a transponder signal, but even if that was a Russian or Chinese jet, they're able to recognize the electronic signature and the exhaust signature of those jets, so they would know. So if his theory's right, then the pilot would have to be totally incompetent to not realize that he was looking at a jet. And,
Interesting.
And I think Mick does some good work, but I think sometimes he carries it too far. And he and I have had this discussion on the 2004 Nimitz incident, where he wants to concentrate on the video but he doesn't want to look at the whole package. And I think it's important to look at the whole package from beginning to end. And by that, I mean within a 4 hour period of time, you have three incidents of extreme acceleration. Number one is the statements from the radar guys. Number two are the four jet pilots who see an object disappear in 2 seconds. And number three is the video. And the video is actually, in my mind, the weaker of the three acceleration cases.
Which video is that?
This is the Nimitz. It's also called the FLIR 1 video
Yeah.
from 2004.
Let me read to you what I wrote about this based on mix analysis. The FLIR 1 video, for example, the object appears to zoom almost instantly off the screen, interpreted by some to indicate extraordinary speed and turning ability far beyond anything our jets are capable of. Note that in the upper left of the screen, the camera zoom indicator doubles from 1 to 2 at the moment the object zooms to the left. When McWest slowed down the video replay from zoom 2 to zoom 1, the extraordinary maneuver becomes quite ordinary. Now, I know you have an explanation for that, but let me finish. FLIR 1 and gimbal, says West, are what one would see if a jet were flying away from the camera, thus accounting for the eyewitness accounts that the object showed no directional control, surfaces, or exhaust, and their apparent shapes as saucer-like and tic-tac, West continues, are due to glare on the lens of the camera. As he told the San Diego Union Tribune reporter Andrew Dreyer, what we're seeing in the distance is essentially just the glare of a hot object, most likely that of an engine, maybe a pair of engines with an FA-18 or something like that. Then I add a parenthetical note here after talking to you. To be sure, not everyone accepts West's conclusions. See, for example, ufologist Robert Powell's analysis in his 2024 book. Okay, who told me you are correct in your quoting Mick. Whether his assertions are correct or not is very debatable. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so in that particular case with the video, we actually did look at the magnification change. So we took that into account. So Mick's final argument then, right, is this. His argument is the FLIR system is locked on to this object, which he believes is a jet aircraft, and then the FLIR loses lock, right? So he's saying that basically, I've got this FLIR and I'm following this aircraft, right? And so it's staying in the center of the screen. I lose lock. So it means if I lose lock, the aircraft keeps on moving. So he's saying that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the aircraft move because your FLIR system lost lock. And that's a possibility, right? And those are the arguments Mick makes, of course, right? His argument is, well, that's a possibility. And that possibility, we don't know for sure, right? That's his argument. But it's much less likely than those being an extraterrestrial craft, right? And that within itself is a valid argument. But what he's not taking into account is all the other steps and instances that happen that day, right? So you have an object that shows up on radar, you send the jets 60 miles away to where your radar says there's an object, and what happens? The jets see the object, right? So that's pretty good confirmation that object is real and was there. And then you see the jets one of the jets engage it, and then the object, once after the engagement, disappears in 2 seconds, right? So now you have another very anomalous incident that happens within this 4-hour period. And then, and this one's very, anecdotal, but as they're going back to the Nimitz, the USS Princeton calls those F-18s and says, you'll never guess what just happened, but that target is now back at your cap point. So they're telling it, this object has now traveled 40 miles away back to where you were in the beginning, sitting at your cap point, which is basically an XYZ location in the atmosphere where the jets hang around in order to defend a carrier strike group. So that I think it's important to look at the whole incident, not just the video. If all we had was the video, then I think, I would say, well, yeah, that could be. but we have these other things.
Yeah, the other problem is, mix operating in a limited amount of information, as are you and the rest of us, that the government is willing to tell us.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
exactly.
frustrating.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
guess it's in
that's
the.
the
I guess the argument from their point of view is it's national security. We don't need to tell you. It's a need to know, and you don't need to know.
right, right. And that's the thing. They could solve all these headaches that they have dealing with this issue, right? Uh, if they just provided that information so that we could know.
See, I can't help but wondering. These government task force tasked with figuring out what these UAP videos are. Really? I mean, don't they have somebody in there like Mick West or yourself that's like, okay, we're going to get to the bottom of this. Here it is.
Yeah.
And, these groups we hear from, it's like, well, we're not sure. We talked to some people. We're going to look some more. We're just kind of trying to get our mind around. It's like, really? Come on.
Yeah. I mean, you've got the radar data that puts an end to the story, right? I mean, either this object moved at that speed or it didn't. So what does the radar data say?
Yeah. The other two videos, the triangular shaped objects blinking with a green background, and then the zigzagging submersible sphere as the media and public gawked at yet another triangle-shaped UFO. McWest noted that it was filmed at night beneath the flight path into LAX and that the object blinked in perfect unison with that of a commercial airliner flying into Los Angeles from Hawaii. The triangular shape, he surmised, was most likely the result of a triangular-shaped lens aperture and the bokeh effect, or the soft, out-of-focus background generated by shooting a subject with a fast lens and wide aperture. In fact, there are other triangle-shaped objects in the image that corresponded perfectly to celestial objects that West identified as the planet Jupiter and some known stars. That one seems kind of really, I mean, they always show that. It's on every UAP video documentary made. There's those blinking green triangles.
Yeah, now that one Mick could be right on. I don't know. We have not analyzed those videos, and here's the reason why. In the same thing for the gimbal and the go fast, you we're not able to interview the witnesses, right? And so, to me, a video is no more or less valuable than the witness who can tell you what happened at that moment in time. And so, just to have this video, it takes lots of effort to go analyze that. And I'm not going to analyze it unless I can talk to the witnesses. And we're not able to do that because these are cases that are happening with guys who are currently in the service. And I find it interesting just that these get released. I don't know, how that happens when these guys are still active duty servicemen.
Yeah.
But I I suspect that the gimbal video, there's something to it, but I'm not going to put effort in it unless I can talk to the Navy pilots that were flying those aircraft.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to show a graph here from your page 35 on annual UFO reports from 1890 to 2000. And you can see there's the huge spike around World War II and immediately after in the 1950s, late 40s and 50s and so on. And then it ends at 2000, and there's another spike after that with the UAP videos and so on. What do you think is going on there? I mean, you can't see in this graph, but there are little tiny bars for 1890, 1900,
Right,
1910, and so on. But
right,
the massive
right.
spike. What's going on there?
So the way I look at it, Michael, is okay. There's always a background noise, because you're always going to have some people that feel they see UFOs. Now, is it possible those are real? Yeah, yes, maybe. But I'm looking for a sudden change. And so
Hmm.
that sudden change actually does not happen in 1947, which is when most people think it happened during, which is the Kenneth Arnold sighting. It actually happens in 1942 with the Foo Fighters, and not only the Allied fighters saw these objects, but so did the Axis fighters. And that's when the uptick happens. So to me, something happened in history. And I don't think it's media reports that began the UFO stories that, continued to this day. I think it's an actual event that happened. So my my view is that this is the time when whatever these objects are that are not man-made first started showing up in 1942.
Mm. And also more media coverage, and people have cameras, and then you get maybe some social contagion where people hear about these things and they're more likely to look up and then see whatever's normally there that they didn't notice
Yeah,
before.
and now that's true also because, and I point that out in the book. I use the Stephenville example, and you can see that you have a low noise level, just like you saw there, and then suddenly you get a burst, right? And once you get that first burst, the media gets involved, and then you get add-on cases, right? Some of it is add-on because an individual feels more comfortable talking about it now that it's in the news. Some of the add-on is because, like you just said, people start looking up in the sky, so anything they see becomes a UFO. And then the interesting thing in the Stephenville case is after a few years goes by, it drops back down to the noise level, and you just have noise levels. But what that tells you is something happened in 2008 that initiated that sudden burst, and it gets complicated because of what you just mentioned. The media is going to add to those reports just by the act of reporting.
What is the best explanation, in your opinion, of the Foo Fighters during the Second World War? Or what does the government say they were, or the military, or whatever?
Well, the government actually investigated the Foo Fighters. They sent a scientist. His last name was Griggs, to investigate that. And as to what they were, they didn't reach a conclusion. My my gut feel is that the ones that are plasma are real, but I don't know what they are. I would just have to be conjecture, right? Like we were talking earlier. Could they be intelligently controlled, balls of energy? Um, but whatever they were, they're littered throughout the fighter reports of the Second World War beginning in 1942. And they're even, when Griggs interviewed some of the German pilots after the war ended, their comment was, well, we thought they were yours, which is what we thought. We thought they were the Germans.
Yeah. If it's a natural phenomenon, some kind of plasma physics thing going on in the atmosphere, why don't pilots see them now?
On occasion, you do. I'll read a report and I'll read it and I'll say, man, that sounds a lot like the old Foo Fighter. So sometimes you do still hear reports like that remind you of the Foo Fighter reports.
Yeah. Okay, I had Michael Schellenberger on the show here. He does a lot of other investigative journalism stuff, but he got into the UFO stuff a little bit after the Grudge report, David Grush's, the report to Congress about what he not what he saw, but people he knows saw. And Schellenberger then looked into this, and he found news sources that confirmed. Well, I'll just read what he said. The individuals are all either high-ranking intelligence officials, former intelligence officials, or individuals who we could verify were involved in U.S. government UAP efforts for 3 or more decades each. These individuals said they had seen or been presented with credible and verifiable evidence that the U.S. government and U.S. military contractors possess at least 12 or more alien spacecraft. I know of at least 12 to 15 craft, said one person, who said they shared the information with AARO, and Congress. Every 5 years, we get one or two recovered for one reason or another, from either a landing or that we catch or they just crash. AARO is the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, a DoD program established in 2022 to replace and expand the scope of this previous program, Airborne Object Identification and Management Group. A different contractor said there were at least 4 morphologies, different structures, 6 were in good shape, 6 were not in good shape. There were cases where the craft landed and the occupants left the craft unoccupied. There have been high-level people, including generals, who have placed their hand on the craft, and I would have no reason to disbelieve them. I mean, this is astonishing. I mean, he's telling me this. I'm like, well, Michael, this is huge. I mean, who is it you talked to? Can't tell you. Can't reveal my sources. Like, oh,
So
come on.
I can tell you, Michael, I've talked to some of the guys that were in some of these programs that have said this also. So, and so let's take Grudge, for example. So I see there's two parts to his. One is the testimony you just mentioned, where he says, I've talked to guys who they know, and they've told me, right? But the second part of his testimony, to me, was the more important, which he said he has seen government documents that support it, right? So this really isn't a question for science. This is a black and white question for Congress. Either Congress needs to simply investigate, his claims. And if there are government documents that exist that support Grudge's statement, then he needs to give Congress the names of the documents, where they're at, and Congress needs to go get them and look at them. And either it is or it isn't. But where we're at today is it's more like he said, she said.
Yeah.
We're getting nowhere with this.
I know, so frustrating. That's like almost a year. Well, that is a year ago now. I think, what are we here in May? And that was, when was that, April?
Yeah.
2023. Yeah. So it's like, and at the time, of course, on social media, everything happens rapidly, but it's like, this is it. We are finally going to get disclosure. And okay, where is it? It hasn't happened. We still don't know.
Yeah. And it's assuming that Grudge is correct, then it's Congress's job to verify that. It's really no one else's, in my opinion. And but I suspect that we'll never hear the answer. No one will investigate it, and it will just stay like it is today.
I mean, here's another one. One source described having seen 3 kinds of craft, including one shaped like a triangle and another one that looked like a chopped up helicopter with the front bubble of a Huey helicopter with the plastic windows, or more like a deep sea submarine with a thick piece of glass bubble shaped, and where the tail rudder should have been, it was a black egg-shaped pancake, and instead of landing gear, it had upside-down ram horns that went from top to bottom and rested on the ends of the horns.
Now, that's an interesting one, because this is like Hynek's strangeness, argument that, it's so strange. Why would anyone make that up? And that's what comes to my mind when you describe that. It's like, why would someone come up with that kind of description of an object? Because that doesn't sound aerodynamic at all, especially the horns coming out of it.
So I guess one question is was David Grudge lying? No, I'd rather not give people that interpretation. Let's give him benefit of the doubt. He's telling the truth. This is what I was told. Yes, okay, he was told. Maybe the people that told him this, or the people that know somebody that told them, and then they told Grudge, maybe they were just honestly mistaken. I saw this thing. I didn't know what it was, and here's what I saw. But they're actually looking at some experimental aircraft or something like that, like a Delta-shaped, you mentioned the SR-71 Blackbird or the Stealth Bomber, any of those. I used to live in Altadena, just above Pasadena, and I would see the Delta-shaped UFO every January 1st at 8:05, which is when the Rose Parade was about to start, and from Edwards Air Force Base, they flew the Stealth Bomber right over Colorado Boulevard, right over the Rose Parade, and it circled around above my house and back down for a second run, and then went back to Edwards Air Force Base. And, the first time I saw that, because I knew what it was, but it was so spooky. I mean, when it came toward me, it made no sound. And the black is like a hole in the sky. It's not like any kind of black I'd ever seen. It's like, whoa, if I didn't know what this was, this would be really weird.
Wow. So you weren't able to, because I've heard one before, but you weren't able to hear the
when
B2.
It was coming toward me, I couldn't hear it. When it went past me, I heard it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But that's the interesting thing about some of the triangle reports is, and not just triangles, but discs also, is when the witness says, it's not like the witness says, there was no sound. It's like the witness says, there should have been sound, and I could not hear the sound, right?
Mm.
So like in your case, when you heard the B2 go over, if when it passed you, you still did not hear sound,
Yeah, that would be
you would
weird.
probably have thought, that's kind of interesting. How
Yeah,
did I
yeah.
not hear anything?
But see, what this makes me wonder is, maybe DARPA or any of these organizations or advanced research companies have some experimental aircraft, and I just don't know about it. We'll find out in 20 years. Oh, that's what that was.
Yeah, the thing is, though, objects without sound have been reported now for almost 50 to 60 years. So that's what makes me think it's not.
Yeah. So the core of your book really is those certain characteristics: the strangeness phenomenon, the weird shapes, the dumbbell shape. I mean, that is the weirdest one. Like barbell weights or something. It's just, why would it be shaped like that? And the accelerating speed, not just the speed, but the rapid acceleration.
Yeah.
That allows you to therefore eliminate normal terrestrial phenomenon as an explanation.
Right. Yeah. That's my goal, is to eliminate the terrestrial.
Yeah.
When I'm looking at these things.
Yeah. So then we're left with this residue of anomalies. What do we do with it, right? So let me just read another part from your book, and then we'll kind of wrap it up here. How have witnesses reacted to UFO sightings? There's been over 300,000 people who have witnessed a UFO over the last 80 years. The National UFO Reporting Center has over 130,000 sighting reports. The Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, has over 125,000 sighting reports. Project Blue Book had over 12,000 reports, and tens of thousands of reports have been filed with UFO agencies in Great Britain, Canada, Australia, France, China, Brazil, Belgium, Italy, and New Zealand. Most of these witnesses misinterpreted a known object or saw an object at a far distance that they could not identify. Those are not the witnesses of interest. The witnesses of interest are those who saw a UFO that was nearby, usually less than 500 feet distant, or who saw a UFO perform sudden turns and accelerations that cannot be explained by anything man-made. Their reactions are often life-changing. They have witnessed an event that they will remember for the rest of their lives. When they tell their story, it often begins with, "I will never forget." Yeah. Yeah, so obviously, Robert, there's something really weird going on. I don't know what it is. Nobody seems to, that I could talk to anyway, seems to know what it is. Come on, government, just tell us what you know. I mean, come on. It's enough. I mean, Avi says this all the time, and Chris Mellon, who blurbed your book, but he's on the Galileo project with me. He's always saying this too, and he worked in government.
and Chris and I we disagree on one thing, and because I'm now of the view that I've given up on government. My view is Congress needs to give money to academia, let them study it, and let the government do what their thing, which is national security. Let them do that, but let science do the investigation of this phenomenon. I think that's the only way we get an answer, because for 80 years it's been the military, and they've gotten nowhere.
Yeah, I know. Come on, it's time. Just tell us. Disclose. Of course, part of the problem is they go, okay, we're going to tell you what we know. That is, we don't know if they're aliens or not. They're probably not. This isn't going to satisfy a lot of people.
Right.
They're just lying like again.
Like in the Arrow report, they said there is no evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence here. And my first question is, okay, what was the evidence you're looking for? What evidence would define that to you? Because they don't tell you. So what does that mean to say there is or is not?
Right, exactly. They need to tell us, what would it take to change your mind? What would it take for you to go, you know what, we have made discovery of extraterrestrial, something like that. So obvious that you and I and everybody else could look at. It's on the daily news, and there it is.
Yeah, kind of like what you said earlier. I want somebody to shoot it down and then pick up the pieces.
Here it is. It's at the Smithsonian now. We can go see it. That's what I want.
Yeah. Right.
All right, Robert, I got to run. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for your book. Where are you off to next for your next investigation?
Oh, I'm off to the SCU conference, which is the end of this month. So we'll have a number of scientists there that will present on this subject. So
I don't know about what is SCU? What is that?
The SCU conference, you can find it if you go to explorescu.org, but it will be in Huntsville, Alabama. And there's an SR-71 there. And we'll have a number of scientists. Kevin Knuth will be there, John Bittner, Beatrice Villarreal, several guys that you probably have heard of. Matthews and Dagus will be there. And we'll be discussing the UAP/UFO subject.
Nice. Well, if you know anybody that wants a skeptic on their team, I'm always volunteering for these conferences and groups, and they never invite me. It's like, come on.
Well, if when we have our conference next year, I'll hit you up. Maybe you'd like to come down and
yeah, I do.
I think it would be good. I think you'd have a good time. I mean, most of these guys are collegiate. They're nice and polite, and I think you would enjoy it. You probably know Sarah Little. She's actually the SCU science advisor. She's also part of the Galileo project. I don't know if you run into Sarah.
Yeah.
But
I love all the books. I've read all these books on kind of the sociology of it and the anthropology of it, and they don't take a stand on what it is. It's just as an interesting social and sociological cultural phenomenon. It's also interesting. We didn't get into that. Is it a kind of religion or whatever? Because here we just want to know what
we didn't
is
get a chance to touch on religion. Which, by the way, just so you know, I am religious and I believe in UFOs. So there are people that are religious that believe in UFOs.
Yes, well, I did like those studies that I mentioned at the beginning. That would your religious beliefs be disrupted if we discovered aliens? Most people say no. Why? If you really believe in an omniscient, omnipotent deity, they can go to any planet they want, or the guy can go to any planet he wants.
It doesn't make any difference.
That's interesting. Okay, Robert, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Michael. Take care.